Refactoring is not a separate task. It's not something that we should consider as a separate task compared to the typical software development as we consider it. It's something that we should consider in our daily work. This is what we will discuss today and what I will go in deep to share with you my thoughts. I'm Daniele, this is Learn Agile Practices, and it's Weekly Pomodoro, our weekly 25 minutes together to share with you some of my thoughts about Agile practices, technical excellence, and the best practices around software development. Thanks to everyone for all the support in the latest week. This is my second episode in English. I'm going alternating Italian and English because I really want to keep producing podcast in Italian, but I also want to move to English, so this is working for me for now. And before starting, the usual thing we need to do on the web. So if you are on YouTube, subscribe, make sure to activate the notifications, share the video, or if you follow on podcast platforms, share the episode of the podcast with everyone you think could be interested, and go in the description because you can find everything about Learn Agile Practices, the newsletter, which is in English, the blog, also in English, and all the content I create, and also you can discover the ways to support my work there. So go have a look. And now the intro, and then we start. Okay. So, refactoring. The thing I want to discuss today is that usually we think to refactoring as something we do occasionally. Like if it's something special, that we do from time to time to clean up things that are too dirty. When we become to be scared by a piece of code, for example, we typically think to schedule some time to clean it up because we can no longer handle it. And usually you find yourself in the situation where you, for example, schedule a week of refactoring because you need to clean up a lot of things, or sometimes you even rewrite some pieces of software. You think that rewriting is a good idea because you are not able anymore to maintain that code with a low cost of change. Every time that something changes, and it changes every day because that's the real problem in software development, right? We need to have a clean, maintainable code because code will change. If code wouldn't change, we could write the worst code in the world. As soon as it works, we're fine. But that's not the reality, especially in a company, in a business company, when we're writing software for a business, things will keep changing. And that's the main driver, because we want to have maintainable code. Well, my opinion, based on my experience first, I struggled with this idea the first part of my career. I also thought that was the only way to reach some point and say, raise your hand and say, please give me some time to clean up. That's not the right way, in my opinion. And it's not only my experience that is telling me, but it's also, when you start reading and studying about how the best mind in our world described best practices, and especially refactoring, for example, Kent Beck or Martin Fowler, they never say that refactoring is a good idea to be treated as his own task in a separated piece of work, and they never suggest that. In the latest years of my career, I've moved to a different approach that worked well and that proved himself to be the best way to approach, in general, technical depth and refactoring. This approach is to consider refactoring as part of the daily work. You should daily refactoring, not even daily, but just every time you make a change to the code. If you work on 2 different features in a day, it could be more than daily, more than once. But you should refactor code every time you change it. There are multiple reasons because this is a better option. First of all, is not I like to compare this with a kitchen. In a kitchen, you need to keep cleaning up all the tools you need, because otherwise, if you are in a professional kitchen for a restaurant, at some point you will not be able to cook or serve your plates anymore because you didn't clean up the tools. So you need to make the customer wait because you have to clean it up. That will probably cause you some losses. For example, some customer could be mad and angry because they waited too long and go away, and you lose money. Here is the same. We can't expect that business accept and understand that we at some point raise our hand and say, hey, we need to stop for a week, 2 weeks, a month because we need to clean up. because this means that we are asking them to stay stuck for that period of time. We can't evolve our product, we can change it because we need to clean up. That's just not sustainable. Of course, it's not sustainable for a startup for sure, because you need to move fast, but it's also not acceptable, in my opinion, also for bigger companies, because it's just a wrong approach. It's not a good approach. We can take how I even ask now, how can we consider this acceptable? Actually, I have never considered it acceptable. It's just that when I was a junior, I just didn't have enough skills to handle it in a different way. That's the only reason why we think that. We need to build our skills so that we are able to clean up our code daily, keep it clean every day, so that the cost of change doesn't increase. The main objectives when we change our code should not be to add the new behavior. That should be easy. The bigger focus in every change we do in code should be to just keep the cost of change low. We need to ensure that when we change the code, we do not add useless complexity and make it still readable and easy to change. Because the next time we will change it, it should be still easy. Basically, in an ideal world, the cost of change of our software should never increase. This is just impossible, of course. It's like when we think about coupling, we say that ideally we need to have the less coupling possible, because not having coupling at all is impossible, because you need at least to be able to communicate through messages, right? You need to call a function, know how it's named, etc., which is the first level of coupling, with no parameter. Ideally, if we add a parameter, we have 2 levels of coupling, and that's usually what we consider the ideal level of coupling. From the 3rd level, which means more parameter, for example, or more, we start to think that maybe we can do better, right? Here is the same. We can't imagine that the cost of change is 0, because it's just impossible, but we need to keep it as low as possible, okay? So we need to accept, first of all, that if we're not able to keep our code clean every day, it's just a matter of technical skills and technical practices. Probably, if we're not able to do this, the reason is the reality is we can increase the way we work, okay? But how? And also, why? Is it really worth it? So let's deep dive into the why. Well, what I can say to you is that not only according to history of software development, but also this is also my experience, which is little experience still, and also solo experience, but I have gotten a lot of feedback from others professional on LinkedIn about this, and also, again, the biggest mind in our industry support this idea. Daily continuous refactoring is the only way, the best way at least, to keep a system maintainable over time. The best way to keep cost of change low. Maybe you can achieve similar results or comparable results by, for example, scheduling some time every week, for example, every month to clean up, but still the best way is to do it daily. Actually, doing it daily, plus maybe I have seen sometimes that it was worth to have some time dedicated weekly for some bigger cleanups, because sometimes you need to do maybe something bigger, or maybe you're taking experiments because you're in a startup, so you want to make quick experiments, etc., but you want to be sure that you keep it clean, so you just take some, we called it safe net time, because most of times we didn't need that time to clean up, but we knew that we had it. So in case something was happening, an opportunity of business or double or multiple opportunities together, so maybe you have a bit less time and you want to take a couple shortcuts more, you can do it safely because you know you will clean it up anyway. Also, for example, this can be a good idea to ensure that you remove feature flags when you don't need them anymore and stuff like that. But generally, having only weekly or monthly cleanups won't work. It's not enough. It might be enough. It might look like it's enough at the beginning if you are a startup or a small team or a small product, small code base, but still I can ensure that you are less efficient because you don't actually remember what you want to refactoring. You can keep a backlog, but you don't have the pain. When you refactor daily, you are refactoring based on what needs to change now and the pain you are feeling in doing the change. Because when you do it daily, you basically go in the piece of code you need to change for the feature you need to add, and you try to make the change and you ask yourself, is the change easy? Because it should be easy, always. Ideally, it should be always easy. If it's not easy, you should make the change easy first and then make the easy change. So invest some time in refactoring the piece of code, the part of code that you need to change, so that the change now it's easier and you can do it with little cost. This on one side, ensure that the investment you made in cleaning up is paid out immediately by the fact that the change is costing less, but also ensuring that over time the cost of change will remain low because you're taking care of your code base daily. You're keeping it clean daily. So the first strategy I can share with you is the make the change easy first, then make the easy change, which is a quote by me, of course, but it's something that I completely agree on. And it's really powerful. It's really powerful because it has a lot of benefits. First of all, as I said, code will be maintainable over time and will remain clean over time. But you also have to consider this. This way, you will naturally keep the most changing code clean. And the piece of code that changes more often, is the most important in your code base. If it changes often, is because the business logic is there. The important business logic is there. So the fact that we can naturally focus more on keeping the most important, most changing piece of code clean is a great outcome of this approach. Because if you do refactoring later, it's easy to do the mistake to clean up a class that will never change or will rarely change, and then this cleanup is not, it is an investment that it does not have a good ROI. In this approach, you are sure you are immediately seeing the ROI because you are making the change easy first, but immediately see that now the change is easy to do and you do the easy change. Okay, so this is the first pattern, the first approach that I want to share with you. Make the change easy first, then make the easy change. Then we can focus on the second pattern, the second approach, which is the Boy Scout rule, which is similar, but it also implies that you think about your change after you did your change. Boy Scouts have a simple rule when it comes to their camping ground, and the rule is always leave the camping ground cleaner than you found it. We can easily shift this into code and say that you should always leave your code cleaner than you found it. So it should be important and it should be a daily practice that once you did the change, make the change easy first, then make the easy change, but then have a look in retrospective to your change. Try to understand if you can make a bit more cleanup to keep the code cleaner, make it cleaner than before. This way, again, over time, you're ensuring that the part of code that are changing most often will remain clean, because those are the ones that you are cleaning more often, because they change more often and you clean every time they change. Okay, this is powerful. Those two patterns, let's say, those two approaches together are so incredibly powerful. And of course, we need to make this in a smart way. If I have a 2 hours change, I can't imagine to invest 2 hours in refactoring for that, because it doesn't match the investment, right? So what should I do is to, when it comes to make the change easy, then make the easy change, we need to consider it as part of the job, just part of the job. And it will impact the actual time of the investment and it will be repaid immediately. Generally, you probably invested, let's say 5-10% of time, maybe more, to do the change easy. But then again, you can make the easy change and in almost the same time, you have a better result that will ensure that your code will remain clean over time. On the other side, for Boy Scout rule, I usually think about 5-10% of time invested in having a look and make some more cleanups. I only stick to easy cleanups in general, unless I see an abstraction that I'm sure of, so I want to go and implement that abstraction. Otherwise, I just stick renaming, extracting methods, extracting classes that are worth extracting, etc., automated through the IDE or in general. Not big things, but those kind of things that keeps the code readable and maintainable over time and reduce the cost of change. Of course, if we talk about tech debt and legacy code, we also need to consider tests. And this also comes to tests. Tests should be maintained over time also, but especially on non-tested code, the first thing you should do is being able to add some tests. At least one test. From the more external you can, but you need to add some tests so that you can make some changes in an easy way, because you can't refactor without tests. Because refactoring is, the definition of refactoring is changing the structure of the code without changing the behavior. And the only way you can be 100% sure that the behavior is not changed is through an automated code that remains green while you refactor. Okay, so if you need to do this, you want to start this approach on a legacy code system, and I'm using the legacy code definition from Michael C. Feathers. So code without tests, add a test before. You can use golden master or characterization test, which is the easier way usually to add tests to non-tested code. Is completely from the external point of view, but then you can start to extract things, see that the code still works, and then you will be able to add tests to new isolated piece of code. So this is also important and is part of the investment that you need to do. And this is dedicated weekly time. When I've faced very big legacy code where the coverage was very, very little and we wanted to add tests, we combined this approach. Every time we touched a code without tests, we strived to add a test unless there was a very special case that we thought, okay, we can do this now, we would do it immediately. So it was part of the daily routine, okay? But then if something big, sometimes on legacy code, adding tests can be hard. So we had the weekly time dedicated to that. In 2/3 months, we was already seeing that our speed was increasing, and it was keeping to continue increasing day by day, week by week, month by month. Not only because we invested weekly time, but especially because of the daily cleanups. Because this way, you're facing the problem of refactoring or adding tests on small pieces of code. So it's easier. You are on that, you are understanding how it works, you are focused, you don't need to content switch again to it when you have the time dedicated weekly, etc., etc. So it works pretty well. One final thing that I want to share is that, to me, the biggest practice that helped in understanding how real refactoring should work is test-driven development. I know that I always quote test-driven development, refactoring, object-oriented. Those are my favorite agile technical practices, but I can't deny that test-driven development is the practice that changed my career, the way I approach to work. For example, TDD also impacted how I see productivity because I am able in 5 minutes to make some progress on code because of TDD. So it's very, very powerful, but the main thing related to refactoring is that TDD embeds refactoring in the work cycle. And actually he's asking you to, do refactoring every minute, every 30 seconds, because every time you do the cycle, there's also refactoring. This mental approach of TDD makes very easy then when you study refactoring and how refactoring can be done to understand why a daily continuous refactoring works better than scheduled monthly refactoring, or even worse, a dedicated refactoring task for a very long time each year. Okay, and also I really want to make you focus on the main thing here before closing the episode. We as a professional, we really shouldn't consider normal and acceptable that we need to ask to stop the business for a week or a month to clean up the code. How can this be acceptable? The business is put at a very high risk if we stop it, because we can't evolve the platform based on customer feedback and whatever changes in that month. It's very, very risky, and the company needs to make money to be able to keep living and pay us the money and everything. So we need to think about this kind of stuff. Okay, it's part of our job. We need also to consider the cost of what we do. So we can't accept it. Sometimes we don't have any choice because we get an old system or we are increasing our skills over time. So we realize that first we didn't have the skills to do it, but then we start to have it and we want to start doing daily refactoring. So the system is not ideal, which is 99% of situations, right? So sometimes you have no choice than asking for a break to the business and ask for a week or 2 or a month to make a big cleanup. But if it happens that you really need this, you should consider it pretty carefully, but also make sure that it's the last time you need that, because you are causing a problem to the business. Okay, of course, when you do this, you do it because you think that not cleaning up will cause a bigger problem, but you're choosing between two big problems. Instead, you should bring your company to success. So you should try to avoid this. And if it happens, try at least to make it the last time you need it and move to daily refactoring. Okay, so this was my thought about daily refactoring. You can also, if you want, have a look at the newsletter, because over this week I shared my latest issue, which is actually micro-learning content related to daily refactoring and a bit more practical tips on how to start doing daily refactoring. So you can deep dive into the topic with it. If you're not subscribed, you can just subscribe and you will find the article in the archive. And yeah, I will be back next week with an Italian episode, and then in 2 weeks with a new English episode. So until next time, happy coding and thanks to everyone.